And welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So, as I mentioned yesterday, these latter parts of the Parsha of VaYikra deal with sin offerings. And I mentioned yesterday the various categories in terms of the position that one holds, that the higher up the social order you are, the more severe, right, the consequences are for committing sins. And so consequently, the ceremonies involved in bringing a sin offering are more intense and more detailed in a way. So we have dealt with the high priest and how part of the issue is that after he has to bring first of all a bull, and after the bull is slaughtered, the blood of the bull is not. I mean, the part that is taken from the bull into a vessel is then taken into the sanctuary and then sprinkled on the curtain that separates the holy part of the sanctuary from the holy of holies. Some of it's applied to the incense altar, the gold altar, and then the rest is dealt with. There's a ceremony on the altar itself, outside the bronze altar, and the rest of it. So, you can look at sin offerings as either being sort of a consequence or actually an opportunity. That the idea of making good, the idea of being able to bring an atonement is actually a very powerful motif, because when you really try and take into account and see it through the lens of the Torah, the world and the behavior of human beings, certainly I would say through the lens of the Torah, because there's certainly other lenses you can use that also might bring you similar results, but basically through the lens of the Torah, the degree of narcissism, the degree of cruelty, the degree of cheating, etc., of man's inhumanity to man, man's abuse of the environment. You can also look at it as incredible level of ingratitude. And whether or not, here is God trying to create a force in the world, a creature in the world that can bring heaven down to earth, and the way in which we manage to just mangle that whole concept. And instead of looking at our lives and how brief they are, and yet at the same time, the magnificence and the opportunity and the intelligence and the resources and everything to make this world a Garden of Eden, we go just so many individuals go the opposite way. And so the ability to gain atonement, meaning, first of all, that you have to admit you did something wrong, right? It's a change of direction. But that opportunity to make atonement and to be able to find that is something extremely, extremely precious. So you can see this actually as a gift. We can get all tied up in the fact that we're taking animals and slaughtering them, but quite possibly there's an element here to say that what we're doing is a life and death situation. And sadly, in this particular case, we are given an opportunity to take an animal and slaughter it and try to gain atonement. So there was a process that when you made atonement, you had to put your hands on the horns of the animal and bear down. And the animal was essentially, and I've mentioned this, of course, in previous lessons, was an extension of yourself. That was the idea, to realize that what you might think wasn't that big a deal, was maybe frivolous and what have you, in fact, in some cases, was far from frivolous, was something extremely a matter of life or death. So, next category, this is what it says in the Torah. The imkol adat, and if the entire congregation Yisrael of Israel, yishgu, will, literally it means make a mistake. There are three categories of sin, one more severe than the other. The categories being shigaga. Shgaga is the lowest category of sin. It's where you don't realize that either you're not aware that this is a law that you are breaking, or you've just forgotten about the law and didn't remember that it was a law, or similar kinds of, so for example, on Shabbat, you forgot it was Shabbat, and you did something that you should not have done on Shabbat. That's a shgaga. It means unintentional, quite literally, unintentional, right? Then there is mezid, right? There's a zadon. Zadon is where you know it's wrong, you know the situation is about the situation, and you do it nevertheless. It's the ain't no one going to tell me what to do kind of situation. You're fully conscious of what you're doing, and you still do it. Okay. And it's not necessarily you're doing it because out of the third category is outright rebellion against God, right? So that is where you know it's wrong and you're doing it seriously, saying, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do what God tells me what to do. I'm going to do whatever I want to do. And that is actual rebellion. Okay. So that's these two other categories beyond shgaga are far more serious and might involve other kinds of issues that are not simply dealt with through bringing an offering. So, v'ne'elam davar, and in other words, the matter is hidden, me'enei haka'al, from the eyes of the crowd, the group. V'asu, and they did something, right? V'asu. Achat mikol mitzvot Hashem, they did one of the commandments of the Lord, asher lo te'asena, which should not be done. In other words, they violated a negative commandment for Ashemu, and indeed they are guilty. They're guilty. So let's take a look at the Rashi on this. Right, let's see. Let's see if it begins here. I doubt if it does. Yes, Adat Yisrael, right? The congregation of Israel. This is important. We could really misunderstand the Torah here. And so we require the interpretation which says Elu Sanhedrin. This refers to the Sanhedrin, the highest court. Because ultimately, just like with the Supreme Court, the laws, ultimately the decisions and how the laws are to be applied, etc., rests on them. So they represent Adat Yisrael. Their behavior, because they are legislating regarding laws and making rules regarding the laws of the Torah, are going to affect the rest of the people. Everyone else is affected by it. So we can see that they have that in common in that sense that what the high priest does and how the high priest comes before God, etc., and representing the entire Jewish people, is people of Israel, likewise from a spiritual point of view, right? Maybe an even more direct point of view between the relationship, that is dealing with the relationship between the people and the divine, likewise on maybe a slightly less level, this is the Sanhedrin. Ultimately, it's going to rest on them. So that's the Adat Yisrael. The Ne'elam Hadavar, and the matter is hidden. Ta'u lehorot, they made a mistake in horot, that means teaching, right? In giving a judicial teaching, ba'achat mikol kmitota. So this is interesting, that it isn't just any negative commandment. It has to do with those commandments that have the punishment of karet, translated often as excision. Cutting off, that's what krita means. In other words, so an example of a karet issue would be eating chametz on Pesach. Eating leaven on Pesach bears with it the punishment of karet. And there are a certain number, I don't remember the exact number, it's not a huge number of negative commandments that bear with them this punishment. This punishment is a divine punishment. It's not one that is given by a court. What exactly it means, we've discussed this before. It's not certain. There's an opinion that says it means that your life is cut short. That's one interpretation. Uh, there is an interpretation that I wonder about, namely, does it mean that immortality, you're cut off from your immortality? That as human beings, the consciousness, the intelligence, the abilities we have, extraordinary abilities as human beings, also allows us to achieve immortality. But there are certain things that we can do that will destroy that. So this is in a case where the Sanhedrin has said something that was a karet, that bore with it the punishment of karet. They said it was permissible. They didn't do it intentionally. They made a mistake. Okay, we call kritot shebat Torah shahu mutar. In other words, that they said that that was permissible. They said it's okay to eat chametz on Pesach, or this particular thing, which turned out to be chametz, is permissible. This is just one example. Kahal va'asu, right? Kahal, the congregation or the group, and they did it. She'asut tzibur, that is to say, the situation was such that the whole community, that tzibur is the group, the large group, al pihem, or the public. Tzibur, we could translate as public, al pihem, at their mouth, literally based on their ruling. The public wound up doing this particular thing. So I think we can even see from here that there's a lot of stuff to unpack. Ultimately, some of that is going on here in the Torah T'mima, but that in fact the situation here is already limited. We can see that it's not any commandment. Doesn't include positive commandments. It doesn't include any negative commandment. It includes the specific commandments that bear with them the punishment of karet, and the fact that the people have done it. Right? So it's not just a matter of having made a bad ruling, but made a ruling such that the public actually have acted on that ruling. That's what it's sounding like. And this is all that's happened. All right, let's go on. So, v'nod'ah hachatat, and they are now aware, right? It's become known, this chatat, this sin. Now, again, chet has the meaning in another context of like shooting an arrow and missing the mark. And that's another way. In other words, yes, you do shoot the arrow, but you make a mistake in aiming. You didn't aim correctly. So there's that sense, right? So, asher chatu aleha, concerning which they had sinned. VaYikra hakahal. Now we come to the atonement activity involved, right? The kahal is referring again to the Sanhedrin, essentially, who are responsible for it, right? And on the behalf of the kahal, the large group, the public, they shall offer up par ben bakar. Again, it is going to be a bull, right? Large animal, ben bakar, in other words, of the herd, the chatat, as a sin offering. Veheviu uto, they shall bring it, lifnei ohel moed, before the tent of meeting. V'samchu ziknei ha'edah, and the here we go. See, now we're getting the backup of what we said originally, right? So now the elders of Ha'edah, of the community, et yedehem, they shall place their hands, they shall bear down with it, al rosh hapar, on the head of the bull, lifnei Hashem, before God, v'shpat et hapar, and they shall slaughter the bull, lifnei Hashem, before God. Again, let's check it. Okay, going on. No Rashi on this. V'hevi hakohen hamashiach, and the anointed high priest, or priest, the anointed priest, shall bring hevi meidam hapar, from the blood of the bull, el moed, into the tent of meeting. V'taval hakohen etzba'o minata, the priest shall dip his finger into the blood, right? Take some of the blood, dip it on his finger. V'hiza, and he shall sprinkle sheva pa'amim, 7 times, lifnei Hashem, before Hashem, epnei haparochet, the surface on the front of the parochet, the curtain, the screen, that is, right, before, in front of the Holy of Holies. So this is very similar, right? Very similar to what the high priest had to do if the high priest sinned. So, ipnei haparochet, the front of the screen. Ulamala, and above, in a verse above, which describes this, hu omer epnei parochet kodesh. There he says, he doesn't say epnei haparochet, he says pnei haparochet hakodesh. There he says, the holy screen. And that's back in chapter 4, verse 6. I'll show you. Go back to 6. Not go too far. Yeah, got to go a little bit further. Yep. Back here. See, we are a little bit more. Here we go. Lifnei Hashem epnei parochet hakodesh. See that? And here it just said pnei haparochet, right? So let's go back there. Just wanted you to see what Rashi was referring to. Let's find the place. Okay. Almost there. Okay. Okay. Just the next page, right? So there we are. We're right here. So, ulamala hu umer et pnei parochet hakodesh. Mashal, so we can compare this to the melech, to a king. Shesarcha alav medina, that an entire province rebelled against him. Im miuta sarchu, right? If just a few of these people in the province rebelled against him, Pamalia shelo mitkayemet, his court remains in existence, right? It remains sustained, right? I think what this means is that his authority isn't totally questioned, right? Because they're rebelling, which means they're rebelling against his authority, but his authority is still in place. If just a few people in this province, the minority of the province, rebel against him. Ve'im kulam sarchu, but if the entire province rebels against him, right, rebels against his authority, ein pamalia shelo kayemet, his authority is now brought into complete question. I'm saying, of course, with regards to that province. Afkan, here too, Keshachata Kohen Mashiach, right? So the anointed priest refers to the high priest. When the high priest rebels, or at least Chata, not rebels, but in this case sins, Adain Shem Kedushat Hamakom Ala Mikdash. We can still speak in terms of the sanctity of the place regarding the Mikdash, according to the sanctuary. Mishechatu kulam, but if all of them sinned, which is, of course, happens as a result of what the Sanhedrin has done, they've now all, contravened the authority of God. Chas v'shalom, God forbid, nistalka akdusha, the sanctity disappears, no longer in place. Umin hadam, and from the, some of the blood, yiten al karnot hamizbeach, he should place on the horns of the altar asher lifnei Hashem, which is before Hashem, before God, And that's, of course, referring to the golden altar, the altar of incense, just to be absolutely certain, because you could say that the bronze altar was also before God, even though it was outside, Asher be'ohel moed, which is in the tent of meeting, inside the tent of meeting. So no question, it is the golden altar. Ve'et kol hadam, and all the remaining blood, yishpoch el yesod mizbach ha'olah, that he should pour against the base of the altar for the burnt offering, meaning the bronze altar outside the tent itself. Asher petach ohel moed, which is at the opening of the tent of meeting. So Yisod is Bach Ha'olah, right? The base of this altar of the burnt offering, Asher Petach Ohel Moed, which is at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Ze Yisod. So the altar, of course, had four sides to it, and the tradition is Ze Yisod Ma'aravi. This is the western side of the altar. Shehu Keneged HaPetach, because that's directly opposite the opening of the tent of meeting there. So that's where we'll leave it for today. Oops, sorry. Let's take care of this. Oops. Let's see. Let's try this again. And I'm going to mark it up here. I know you can see this. Okay, let's see. And this is where we are in terms of verses. And I'm going to stop the share. Any thoughts, any comments on what we've done so far? Okay, all right.